E360 TV proudly presents messages of inspirational stories. Live streaming now to millions of devices, including Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, YouTube Live, Facebook Live. With your host, Donna and producer and host, Jim Grant, producer and host, along with Michaela Vidal, administrator and host, and Gaia Ginwa Balconi Wada, editor-in-chief.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Messages of Inspirational Stories. Emerson, awesome. I'm so excited to do a show with you today. It's been a minute since we've done a show together.
It has.
Well, we're giving Jim a day off, a badly needed day off. He's so darn busy. But, you know, we're talking about this week, we've been talking about how to survive inflation. And boy, that's a big one on everybody's mind right now. Yep. Interest rates are going up, credit card rates, you know, that you've had your credit card at a certain rate forever has gone up. I mean, I don't think anyone's infallible to that.
Yeah. The only bright spot recently is gas has dropped.
Right.
Which is good, but it still is a lot higher, you know.
It is. You know, I know you guys talked yesterday a little bit, Emerson. I'd like you to expand on it just a touch, but about, and I think it's important, and I want to segue into this about, you know, instead of being upset or not even sure what the right word is, but about what we maybe aren't being able to purchase right now, that we need to be looking inward at what we have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we don't have control over a lot of the things that are going on. And, you know, it's the God grant me the serenity, right?
Right.
To change the things I can, you know, or
right.
to accept the things I'm stumbling on it, but everybody I think is pretty much aware of the serenity prayer about being able to the things that you can change and things that you can't change,
right.
and
what
the
you
serenity
can,
to be at peace with that.
Right, and be peace at what you can.
Yeah. So, you know, to me, that's a huge first step.
Right.
It's very, very difficult, I should say, to avoid the news constantly. Yes. When I log in, when I go to, you know, do a search or anything else, it's always right there in your face.
Right.
And I'm not someone who says, and you and I have both known people over the years who said, well, I cancel the newspaper and I don't watch any of the news and I, you know, don't want it to interfere with my, well, that's avoiding it is one way to deal with it. Or not deal with it, but just ignore it. But to be an active participant and to be aware of things around us is important, in my humble but accurate opinion.
Well, I think it is important to understand what's going on around us, because when we know, see, knowledge is power.
It is, and applied knowledge.
Applied knowledge is even more power. So when we're aware of exactly what's going on around us without it consuming us.
Right.
We can
That's
then,
the balance.
Right. We can then better take care of ourselves and our family with what we have to work with.
Yes.
You know, I was reading this, I guess it was last night, maybe this morning early, because I was going to sleep in, but the thunder woke me up at 4:00 this morning.
Thunder? You guys don't get thunder out there?
Yes, we do. We are full-blown monsoon season.
That is right, yeah.
But I was reading where Walmart is laying off people at the corporate level because, oh my goodness, they just realized that inflation is causing people to not have discretional spending. Well, hello. Now, what this happens is then we get a domino effect.
Sure.
Right? We get a domino effect. And I know, just for my husband and I, that not that we're really crazy on spending, because we're just not wired that way.
Right.
But even we are really watching what we buy. So I will buy a few extra things like for food and what have you, but I don't buy as much except what we're going to use here quickly, because food is just, going to the grocery store, going over to Kroger, and 4 bags is $120.
Yeah.
And I'm talking the little plastic bags. So it goes pretty quick. But there's lots of different things that we can do to cut back our spending. And I know, I believe it was Monday or Tuesday, Jim and I had talked about, different things we can use. And one of the things I had wanted to talk about was creating within your family, especially if you have a lot of children. And this was from a really good person I know in Utah. And she and her husband have 9 children combined. That's a lot of mouths. So obviously
they already had their inflation.
Right. So, with 9 children, heavens, that doesn't leave a lot of extra under, great circumstances. And here's what they did. And I love this. And I told Jim I wanted to talk about it. So today's the day. They created children currency. So they took different colored paper and had them laminated. Mm-hmm. And that money is for extra chores that they do. And in those extra chores, they can get things like maybe some free time where they don't maybe have to, they can trade it in for a chore, or they can get an extra treat. Because, with 9 children, you can't just be doling out, cookies and this and that, all willy-nilly. It'll be gone in a heartbeat. And I thought that was absolutely genius. Just genius. Think about that. It teaches our children so many valuable lessons, Emerson, that they now have their own currency. And so if they keep, say, potato chips or little packaged cookies or whatever, and they can barter them with their siblings later for maybe a chore that they don't feel like doing that, you're creating an immense amount of knowledge with those children at an early age.
Self-awareness and empowerment.
Right.
And you're giving them decision making.
Entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So many, they have the term helicopter parents, these days. So many parents won't even let their kids decide the pair of socks they're going to wear. And then they wonder why they don't make good decisions, in their teens and 20s.
Right.
And socks are it's even more on point right now, because it's relatively popular, at least in grammar and middle school. It's relatively popular to wear mismatched, loud, big design socks, as a parent, you'd say you need to match your socks, but let them do that if that's what they choose to do. It's not hurting anything, and they're making a decision.
Right.
They're learning decision making.
Right.
And we're not second guessing every decision.
Right.
So,
one of the things. I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm going to come back to the idea of the family money. So go ahead and add what you were going to add.
Well, I was just going to say, I've talked about this briefly earlier this week, but also in other shows, where one of the things that we can do with our children, and I talked about this on my radio show several years ago, where when on a weekend you have time, everybody gets together and you make your snacks for the week, right? So you wash your grapes and you put them in your baggies, and you have, your drinks or whatever it is, cheese slices, whatever it is. And that is an empowerment, so that each child has their own little snack. And that day or the night before, however you choose to do your lunch, they have the power and the opportunity to pick what they want for that day. And the other thing, I always did with my children, especially when I found out when they were young, that there was always, it seemed like, unfortunately, there was always one child who had no snacks to be brought to with class. And they were the only ones sitting there with no snacks. And I always made sure that when I knew which child it was that had a friend in their class that had no snacks, I always packed double so that they could share with their friend.
Wow. It's the kind of the core of this, the thing that we're kind of wrapping this conversation around is current inflation, the market price of things and things like that. But you bring up a very important point. Learning to give, you cannot give a giver. Right. Learning to give, you also receive. As you give, so shall you receive.
Absolutely.
And it's that learning that part of that process builds empathy and understanding and acceptance. And it's also, again, an empowering thing. I have, so I can share, so I can give.
And I think
those are powerful lessons.
It is. But I also think learning to give during a time of crisis is an even bigger, powerful lesson.
Absolutely.
When it would be so easy to kind of pull back and not do anything, right? Just sit there and say, well, we only have this much, so I can't give any away. But you know what you give that other person is everything. And it was funny when this happened with my child. I remember about a month in, they came home from school one day and said, "Hey, Mom." I said, "What's up, baby?" I said, all the other kids want to know if I'll trade snacks with them because my snacks are so good and my little friend's snacks are so good that they want to be able to trade. And I said, "Well, honey, that would be entirely up to you."
Sure.
Right. But I said, and this particular little friend was, had some handicaps. And I said, just make sure that no one takes advantage of your friend. Right. Because unfortunately, that's been a forever thing. But it was really interesting because then again, within this whole concept came up a whole other new thing for my child of bartering.
Bartering is huge.
Right. People barter.
And bartering and in giving without expecting a return, but bartering, being able to establish, I have something of value. I have value.
Right.
And you have something of value. You have value. And let's swap these things because that's something that would be of value to me, and this is something that would be of value to you.
Correct.
And it helps to build an understanding of commerce and entrepreneurship and sharing and giving up things.
Right.
And receiving things. Bartering is powerful.
It is powerful. So, you said you were going to get back to the family child currency. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh. So, I'm going to use a similar business example, and it's appropriate for the conversation that we're having, or the overall conversation we've been having here on getting through today, the new normal,
right,
and the things that we're having to adapt to. But a number of years ago, and I do marketing. I've done marketing for multi-million-dollar corporations in over 30 countries, and I do marketing I've done it for little local companies. This was a little local hardware store in a 4,000 population town. And it had two other little towns nearby. And each one of these towns had historically had two hardware stores. And this little family had bought this hardware store from the family that had had it for 80 years. And they'd been running it for about 4 or 5 years when one of the big box hardware stores moved in and built right in the middle of those three towns. And we've all seen that.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
all seen the problems with Main Street and stores closing and things like that. So I was asked by a friend if I would go in and help them. And so in our very first meeting, I said to them, and I won't say the name of the big box
Right.
store because it's not, you know, they were doing what they were doing, what was right for their business, and they saw an opportunity and they went in. No corporate responsibility there as far as, you know, what other businesses do. I get that. I really do. But they put this right in the middle of these three little towns, and sure enough, one by one, every one of those hardware stores closed.
Right.
Until there was only this one left that this young couple who had two small children were hanging on by their fingernails trying to keep it going. And the very first thing I told them was, they can't compete with you.
I love
Part
that.
of what we're talking about is changing the mindset. It's that shift. And it took a while for them to get it. But the thing that triggered that was of the many things that we did. Well, I'll spend a couple of minutes to just talk about some of the ways that we changed it. We've all gone up to a hardware store like an Ace or True Value, and it's got all sorts of junk out front. They got chairs,
Right.
they got grills, got plants, they got, right?
Right.
I said, first of all, get rid of all of that. Put in a picnic table, put in a water cooler, put in a coffee maker, and begin turning this into a community place.
Right.
The second thing they were doing, they had somebody who was bringing eggs in or something, and they were selling them and making 25 cents extra on. I said, let them keep it all. Give it all to them. And every week you can feature somebody else. And all of their family, their children, their grandchildren will come into the store because grandma's eggs are there, or tomatoes,
Right.
or whatever.
Right.
I said, so build it as a community thing. And
Right.
And finally, and now this is something that a lot of the viewers may not understand, but I said, finally, you need to increase your prices by about 10% or more across the board. And they said, you're nuts, you're crazy. We can't compete with their prices now. They can undercut us anytime and put us out of business. I said, wait a minute. You're going to be giving more than just the products you're selling. Your market wants that. You need those margins to be able to pay your payroll and keep the people in and be able to stay here for your community. And we're going to be offering so much to the community that people will bypass this other store and come here. And they trusted me. And they began doing it. They grumbled about it. They began doing it. Oh, and the other thing I did, you're going to love this. I had, you know, if you ever go into a small hardware store, you've always got some old guy back in our gal back in the back who's been there for 20 years, and they did too. You know, it's Joe in plumbing, and Joe isn't going to try to sell you anything. He's going to ask, how's your granddad doing? Haven't seen him in here for a minute. You doing? You know, it's like that kind of a thing. And even in larger towns, if you're doing business with one of the smaller hardware stores, you'll start getting those relationships going.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Joe in plumbing isn't going to sell anything. He's just like, he's going to say, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. Well, you call me if you need any help. Right?
Right.
I said, so we're going to give him a little card. And it's going to say, nobody likes have to make 3 trips for the same project. Make sure you've got everything you need. And we're going to have a little checklist for everything in that, for the main things in that department. Right? And then that was all Joe had to do. We increased the pricing in the store, and at the same time increased the sales volume in the store by about 20%. So now they weren't hanging on anymore.
Right.
Now we could do free delivery in those areas. Well, the big box store was going to charge $20, $30, $40 to do deliveries. So again, they can't compete with that personal thing.
Right.
But part of it that we did, and this is what triggered it, was I got them to get all of the local businesses together, the restaurants, the dry cleaners, the car repairs, and we printed up money. And that money, those bucks, I don't remember exactly what we called it, but those bucks, every time you bought whatever, $10 worth or something, you got one of those. And you could use that at all these different merchants.
Nice.
And so we began keeping the money in the town.
Right.
And keeping the business in the town.
Keeping it very localized.
Keeping it local, making it personal. But folks, and for everybody viewing, in today's market, we have to think outside of the things we've always known, outside of the box. We have to think of things that are creative. We have to think of things that will work today. And maybe there's something totally new and different, like this plan with the kids. I love it.
Right.
You're not just having the kids do their chores and you're handing them money when they want money. It's like they're working, they're getting, and now they choose how to spend it and barter it and do. And so you're equipping them at the same time.
Right.
So I mean that's a brilliant approach, and you can see why it triggered.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, I'm not a kind of gal who goes out and buys coffees at these little coffee shops. I call them frou-frou coffee.
What do you call them?
Frou-frou.
Okay, frou-frou. We call it she.
And I'm not one who does that. We have a certain kind of coffee we like, and I like my coffee black, and I'm good with it. But you know, it's amazing.
I fixed a couple of pots when we were
a few. We only had a few pots of coffee. But it was interesting because, you know, and I did this with my oldest son, and people are like, well, we don't have enough. Everything's so high. We've got to be able to pay our bills. Well, you know, first thing you have to do is recognize that and recognize what do we need to cut back on. And so I always go to this analogy. What are you spending your money on that is a want, not a need? Yeah. So if you buy a coffee that's only $5 a day and you do it 5 days a week, that's $100 a month. That's $1,100 a year.
That's right.
So, you know, even if you cut that back into, you know, you're only spending $500 a year, right? Or maybe cut it back even further, and every payday you buy one. How much money are you going to be able to save that you can put toward your bills, that you can put toward food? Because obviously food and rent are some of our highest increases that we have out there. And that's how I look at things. I look at how we can save things. You know, my children, well, when they were young, really young, it didn't matter. When they got a little older, it was, you know, the eye roll. But I always packed lunch for my children. I made their breakfast. I packed their lunch. They came home. They had snacks, homemade dinner. My children going out to eat, it was a treat. It was an absolute treat. It was not a staple. And it was I always got, thank you, Mom. What a treat this is. Because it's just something that didn't happen very often. And I, you know, as they got into adulthood, they look back and see, wow, that was huge. Because even though they wanted to be like everybody else and be able to, you know, they would go out all the time, it was just me, and I'm raising 3 children. So there wasn't discretionary, you know, money to just, you know, willy-nilly throw around to go out and eat. But my children's friends always loved to come over and eat at their house because Mom was a really good cook. So you have a payoff, you have a trade-off. And so I think that's the way I would like people to start looking at things, that there's a trade-off, and it's not a bad thing. It's a trade-off, and it can be a beautiful thing.
You're empowered to make those decisions.
Exactly.
The default is just doing it because you feel like it, this is time, and then the argument is, well, I deserve it. I should be able to. I work hard for it. But you know what? None of that changes how it all actually works. There's a principle called the time value of money. And everybody watching is aware of, if you put money in and you earn interest on it, it grows, right?
Right.
There's a reverse of that, though, that recognizes the time value of money. And $1 today is worth more in your hand than it is 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reverse of the idea of interest. And time value of money isn't some airy-fairy kind of concept. Time value of money is how banks make their money.
Right.
You wonder why when you get a check from out of town, they hold it for 5 days?
Right.
It's not because they need to. They have instantly been able to verify it.
Oh, absolutely.
But
and anything they tell you is a big crock.
They're able to generate 4 or 5 days of interest on that money. And
Absolutely.
that might end up being pennies or a few dollars. But when they do that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, they understand the time value of holding that money. Money has value that changes.
Mm-hmm.
Money is an abstract that we've created as humans. But the way that interest works, the way that funds work in business, most business people, this is true, Donna, most business people don't get that that's important. The time that I was in the car business at one point, and for a number of years in different positions, and they have a thing called a floor plan. And the floor plan is a bank program that a car dealer is able to go and acquire, and they don't have to make payments immediately on it.
Mm-hmm.
But after a certain number of days, the interest is high.
Oh, yeah.
On a floor plan. And so people really don't understand. The timing of a car on a car lot can mean you can buy it for less than they spent for that car, because they're going to start having to pay for that car to sit there.
Right.
And they would rather take off of it, move that thing out, and put another one in its place and start the clock again, because they understand the time value of money. And so I encourage all the viewers, go online, Google it, and start kind of getting that concept of what it means. Not just if I put my money in the bank, it's going to grow, but if I get $1 today, it is worth more right this minute than if I want to wait for a year to get that $1.
Well,
and how we use that dollar,
right?
It comes back to do I spend $5? Do I spend $100 a week on frou-frou coffee, or do I do something with it that makes that dollar turn into more than $1?
Right. One of the things that we do is we recently bought a vehicle, and we take that payment, and I always divide it by my month, and I make that payment by that every week.
There you go.
Because it goes
accelerated. It's called accelerated.
Oh, absolutely. It was funny when we got the loan, the guy looked at me, he said, "Well, you've got great credit, but you don't have any car credit." And I looked at him and I laughed. I said, "Well, hell no, I hate debt." And he just kind of looked at me like, okay, that's an interesting take, but it's true. So, my whole thing is pay everything off as quickly as I can.
Here's an important tip in that, is to always specify the extra is being applied to the principal.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
If you don't specify it, not every institution, but if you don't specify it, an awful lot of times, it'll just get in that kind of airy-fairy thing. They call it taking it off the end of the note.
Right.
And when they take it off the end of the note, you're still paying, significantly more money today in interest.
Right.
So
right.
we want it to apply to the principal right now.
Absolutely. And then one of the other things that my dad always said when I was young, and it was hard for me to wrap around because I was a young teenager and I was full of piss and vinegar and thought I knew more than he did.
Not all mellow like you are now.
But he always said that when he got a raise at work, no matter how much it was, he would take that money, take his taxes out of it, and then put that money in savings.
And keep living on the same amount.
Yeah. Exactly. And that is what I have always done. I take, when I would get a raise, I would take that money and I would put it into savings. And it is amazing because when you need it, it's there. Think about that, folks. When you need it, it's there. Was that extra whatever that you wanted but wasn't a necessary, but now you've got to get tires for your car?
Right. Was
it worth that coffee? And, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. This is just the way I operate.
If you want to have a latte, go get a latte. You have every right to do it.
Absolutely.
The key that you're talking about, though, is pay yourself first.
Absolutely. Always pay yourself first.
You're living paycheck to paycheck. Start taking 10% out, 5% out, 15, 20, whatever you can.
Right. If it's $10 a month, start at $10 a month.
Yeah. Whatever. And don't touch it. It's there.
Right.
And if you need it, you'll be glad it's there.
Exactly. And life is just life. And it's going to give us those times when we get those life surprises that you always need that little extra cushion. And that is an important thing. That is so important. And I guess that's why we're talking about this right now in this particular vein of inflation, on how to survive inflation. Because we've been around and seen a few things. And, as a single parent, I tell my husband this: if we had won that ungodly huge lottery that they won in Indiana, because I have been where I've been, raising 3 children alone, other than making sure that my family was financially taken care of and building a sanctuary for cats and dogs, and some donations, our lives, maybe paying a few things off, but our lives would be pretty much the same because it's just how I'm built.
Yeah.
It's just how I'm built. It wouldn't be like I would switch on a dime and go, oh, I don't even have to worry about if it's on sale. It's so innately ingrained in me. And it's not that I'm cheap. It's that I choose a path for me that works. And there is power in understanding those words. It's not that I'm, being, what's the word I want, Emerson? Being cheap.
Cheap. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, it isn't that. There's nothing cheap in my decisions. There's nothing cheap about me. But my empowerment to myself is my choice in making a decision that saves me money. There isn't a time I go to the grocery store that I am not saving money somewhere. And I remember when I lived in Ohio, and my children used to laugh at me when they were still, in their young teen years. And I'd say, oh no, I'm going to get gas here because it's, 7 cents cheaper. And they'd be like, Mom, 7 cents isn't a big deal. I'm like, you're right. And we go to the grocery store. And I'd be like, well, this is on sale here and this is on sale here. So we're going to make a round robin, right? Go to this grocery, the gas station, do it all at once.
Right.
Because these are on sale. And they're like, that is so stupid, Mom. It doesn't make any sense. So I sat them all down, Emerson. Every one of them. I said, all right, life lessons with math. Number 1, sit down. And so I showed them. And I said, now multiply this. I go to the grocery store. Oh my gosh. I don't even remember how many times a week I went to the grocery store with my children. But on an average, probably at least 2 times a week. And it wasn't like a $20 drop. So I took that, I divided it out, same with the or the gas, and I would, get gas usually once every week and a half or so. And I did the math and I showed them just at this and this savings. Look what this is at the end of the year. And their eyes got about that big. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of money, Mom. I said, you're right. It is a lot of money. Because, my father, genius that he was, on every level, said to me when I was probably about 6 years old, he said to me, I was all excited. I had a dollar bill in my piggy bank, and I was so proud of that dollar bill. And I said, look, Daddy, I got a dollar bill. I got a lot of money. And he smiled and he said, good job. He said, now I want you to remember something, baby. He said, that dollar's mighty fine. But he said, if you can take care of the pennies, the nickels, the dimes, and the quarters, the dollars will take care of themselves. Most profound thing I ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah, people walk past a penny on the ground today.
Right.
Right. Well, and there's an old story about a king and a peasant. I don't remember the details of the story itself, but he did a great service for the king. And the king said, name your price. Whatever, up to half my kingdom is yours, And he said, well, what I'd like is to have a penny. The king looked at him and said, I'd like it on the first square of of your chessboard. On the second square, I'd like to have 2 pennies.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you know the story.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted it to double every day. And the king said, I'll give you up to half of my kingdom. What? Tell me, you have to want more than that. And he said, no, that would be more than sufficient. Well, the math bankrupted the kingdom, basically.
Right.
And if you do the math on a chessboard, what you come up with is over $10 million.
Right.
And that's a penny.
Right.
Doubling it every day for
exactly.
30 days.
Yep.
So it's the idea that you take care of the little things, the big things take care of themselves.
Exactly.
And now we're in a new normal. But the things we're talking about, Donna, are even more important today. They haven't changed.
No. And they never will change. As our new normals change, these philosophies and these wisdoms will grow with it, because we have to have the ability to look at what was right in front of us and be adaptable, because if we are not adaptable, we will be extinct.
Very true.
And by extinct, I also mean in our thinking. So if you're not going to budge from point A to get to point C, because you got to cross through B, you're going to be stuck. There's going to be a big problem. And adaptability is important. And so we have to observe what's going on. And we have to observe what's going on in our life. For our pool, I don't go out and buy chlorine, Emerson, until I get down to about the last 5 tablets. Because that money, if I bought it at half a jug, half a bucket, is better spent somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, you're very right. And in the times that we're in, things are changing very, very dramatically in business and in personal, lives, and the way our kids can go to school, and the things we have to be concerned with, added expenses that we didn't have to deal with before. Even with gas going down, it still is more than double what it was just a couple of years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
And no average person has had their income double.
No,
And
no.
and it doesn't just keep going because we're sticking the credit card in.
Right.
You know, one of the biggest issues that I had with one of the new Monopoly games 2 or 3 years ago was that they had a little instead of the Monopoly money that we've all played with, they got a credit card.
Oh.
And they had a little credit card machine. Well, that's not what we want to teach you. No.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Well, oh dear. Yeah, that would be difficult. I think Monopoly is wonderful. I remember, of course, growing up playing it. And it teaches our children. Think about that. Something as simple as a Monopoly game teaches our children how to do, how to think on their feet, how to plan, how to manage their money, how to get out of a situation where you've landed on someone's property and now you owe them, $1,000. Right? So there is so much value. And I think that's what we're talking about here today, Emerson. So much value in what we already own, the power in our own lives. But we have to look at it to acknowledge it and realize we have so much more power within ourselves that we can do to sustain ourselves during times of inflation.
And changing our habits is one of those things. When I went out in the early days of the pandemic, I never thought I would see the entire meat department at a Walmart or huge grocer empty.
Well, my God,
they were cleaning it out.
The toilet paper shortage. And so that was absolutely crazy. The most ridiculous thing in the world. And now there's no toilet paper shortage, but that's because they got smart. The prices have more than doubled on toilet paper packages. So people aren't going to, go in there and spend, $40 and they're walking out with a cart full of toilet paper. $40 is going to buy you about 12 rolls of toilet paper.
But I never thought, and I recognize, and I've we've all seen read different things and seen different movies and but the idea, everything else seeming to be normal, and walking into a major grocer and having their shelves empty.
Right.
It's not something that I really thought I was going to have to see, at least not without some massive, horrible, here in Florida, it could be a series of hurricanes, or out where you're at, it could be a series of wildfires and things, or some big disaster causing.
Right.
But to everything else to seem normal, pretty much, and you walk in and they don't have anything. And so one of the things I did, I said, okay, well, let's start building up the protein that we'll need. And so, all the canned goods are gone, all the meat's gone. And so I went over, and sure enough, bags and bags of dried beans, because people weren't thinking.
Right.
And to me, one of the core things was, okay, there were certain things that I needed to find. And one of them was a source of protein that we would be able to depend on for, I didn't know, a month, 6 months. Nobody had any idea. It could be as long as it has been. But thinking outside of the box, maybe it's not something you've ever done as far as going and getting dried beans and starting that way.
Right.
And I'm just using that as an example. It's finding those things that will work. We needed masks at that time. We needed masks. And I started going online, and holy Toledo, people wanted $200, $300, $400 for 20 masks.
Yeah.
We're
little
talking
price gouging.
N95 mask. And I called all around. I couldn't find any. And I thought to myself, well, where else might I find those? And I thought, when people are painting, like in the automobile industry, they have to have a mask that stops the the molecules from getting. And so I went down to one of the auto supply stores, and they had one box of N95 masks. And the guy said, "How many do you want?" I said, "How much are they?" He said, "Well, they're $3 a piece, or $4 a piece, I think it was." I said, "I'll take them all." You know, he said, "You want them all?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take them all. Thanks."
A lot of painting.
You know, but it's trying to think beyond. I learned something from my middle daughter. Okay, she is a great finder. If you lose anything, she finds it. And when we go to the beach, I can walk up and down that beach for 4 hours looking until my neck hurts and the sunburn. She'll have a handful of shark's teeth. She just has this ability.
Right.
And she, you know what she says to me, Donna? You got to look where it's not supposed to be.
Right. Right.
Where shouldn't it be?
Right.
Okay, everybody else is running to where it should be.
Right.
Where is a place that maybe you wouldn't expect it to be?
Exactly.
And that was how we made it through those early days of needing to, resupply our store, our supplies and things like that. But it's not. We're not in those days now.
No, we're in a new set of days.
But we are in that new normal.
Right.
And a lot of the things, so many people said for so long, "Oh, I can't wait until things get back to normal." Well, we're actually in a new normal. There's
Absolutely.
a lot of things that aren't the same.
Absolutely.
You know, the job situation isn't the same.
Nope.
Meetings aren't the same. I've spoken all over the world, and this is how most meetings are being done today.
Right.
Which I had adapted already to some of that, but that was a big deal for a lot of
people. It was a big pivot real quick.
Yeah, because this was always the second. This was like the also ran part.
Right. This was the second, third backup.
Yeah. So are we live streaming this event? Yeah, but they can't get it going. Well, we don't need it. Let's get going.
Right.
That was the redheaded stepchild part of it, and now it's the main event. But I actually started, and you know this, I actually started a mastermind for professional speakers. We had about 250 speakers in it. And we kept track those first several months of the dozens and dozens and dozens of major annual events being canceled. Right. In one case, it was an event in Orlando that event had earned $40 million for the nonprofit organization putting it on the year before. And these are the things that are being canceled, and they don't know how to respond and react to that. We have to be fleet-footed. We have to think like entrepreneurs and not like corporate. We have to not be locked in our ways, but think outside of those boxes.
Absolutely. And the adaptability in what you need to sustain your family in is where you need to think.
Yes.
Okay. What is it that we need that is the must? And those are the things you need to concentrate on. And the wants can go over here, right? They go over in the column when we get to it. But, right now, because I see it all the time on Facebook, and it breaks my heart, Emerson. It breaks my heart how people are struggling, how during the time of crisis, when here in the United States, when our inflation is at a 40-year high, the landlords all over, corporate and individual, as a rule, are just killing people.
Yep.
They're killing them.
I think I read somewhere that the average rent
over 40%.
Yeah. I want to say over $1,800.
Yes. Here in Phoenix, I know that between 16 and 1,800 is a one bedroom apartment.
Yeah.
between 16 and 1800. And a dadgum, what is it? Like a little, not like a casita, but, it's just efficiency. Thank you. Efficiency apartment. It's like 1,100.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And my youngest daughter was paying $1,100 a month, I think, in Orlando, and they had a 1-bedroom. And they just recently moved because it was going up to 1,800.
Yeah.
In one jump.
Right.
In one jump.
Right.
So it's a new normal, and it's
a sad new normal.
It's a sad new normal, and it's one that adaptability is a real key word, the word that you used there.
Right.
And recognizing that, there's a scripture, and I can't say exactly where it's at. I think it's in Isaiah, in the Old Testament, but it's something along the lines of God will make a way, a highway through the wilderness, and He will make a way where there is no way.
Right.
And what we have to be open and willing to do is to step back and look for that way.
Right.
That isn't necessarily what we've always done, or
what we're used to.
Always did, what we used to do, or the way it used to work.
Right.
You can't relate it. Nobody cares about hearing somebody sit around saying, "Well, back in my day, gas only cost," none of that matters.
Right. I can remember when gas was 60 cents a gallon.
But yes, it's true. Yeah, I can remember how inexpensive compared to the apartments today. Inexpensive apartments. My dad was paying I think he was paying $65 a month back in the early 60s, and the landlord was going to go up to, I want to say, $75 a month, and he thought it was highway robbery. And he went out and he found a house, and the house payment ended up being $65 a month.
Right.
Now, many of you won't believe that a house payment could be that.
Right.
But or an apartment payment could be that. But the even into the 70s, you'll remember this. Even Donna, even into the 70s, people still at the college that I went to, the professors still talked about being a $10,000 a year man.
Right. Right.
That was executive pay.
Right. Well, I remember when a gallon of milk went up from 75 cents to like 90 cents, and I was absolutely floored. I thought, my God, who can afford that?
Now, see, none of the numbers matter here. What matters is we're in the same kind of place here.
Right, but we're adapting. That's what we're talking about.
We're adapting.
Right? So, at 75 cents for a gallon of milk, and it went up to like 90, and I thought, who can afford that? And I still had a gallon of milk in my refrigerator. So we adapt. But how we adapt is what will make us stronger, and it makes your family stronger. And so understanding that, this is a time to really look inward so that you have that power to keep going as a strong unit. When you do that, even though things are crazy expensive right now, you're not going to feel so much pressure and so much negativity, because you found a way to help your family not only survive, but to thrive during the hard times.
Exactly. And I often think of it this way too. We get into patterns and habits and things that are, you said about not being cheap, or versus and we get into these thought processes. There's nothing a parent appreciates, at least I don't think so. There are very few things that a parent appreciates more than when a child has drawn out a card and put "I love you, Mom," or something and they drew it with crayons, and it's not straight, and it's like, that's precious.
I have
the
many
value
of
of it isn't the $5.95 on the back of the card,
Right.
or some clever rhyme that somebody wrote,
Mm-hmm.
that says what you're thinking, which is beautiful. It's beautiful, but the value of it isn't in that, and
Right.
the value of everything that we do, we have to look at in a little different perspective.
Exactly.
When we're talking about things with our kids, when we're talking about the things that matter, that we have to have, the things that would be nice to have, the things that, well, let's plan on that and how we
Right.
can have.
Right. And that's a beautiful way to look at it. That's absolutely a beautiful way to look at it. I love this. Well, Emerson, we are out of time. So I don't know where this hour went, but it went about, in my world, it went about 5 minutes. It was really
That's
quick.
inflation. That's inflation for you,
Listen to you. You're silly. Well, folks, we can't tell you how much Emerson and I appreciate you being with us today and joining us for the show. And, we hope that you and your family are thriving right now and that you are blessed with many things, most of all, love. And as I always like to say, make sure you give yourself grace.
Oh, yeah.
Grace is an important part of life. And without it, it's hard to move forward. So wherever you are, may you and yours have a beautiful day or evening, and we will see you all tomorrow.
Join us again and invite your friends to watch the show if it's meant something to you.
Absolutely. We'll see you tomorrow, folks. Bye-bye.